Why don't we start the meeting of the Program and Grants Committee and then people can join us? I think we won't be 2 hours. I think we might be striking our stride now that we've got through a lot of the grants and contracts. Hopefully that's true. But Grayson, why don't you start since you just spoke?
Yeah, I can go ahead. Let me just get the agenda pulled up here. Well, I know not everybody's joined yet, but we can just start with introductions. Joe, if you want to go first.
Sure. I'm Joe Everett, the President and CEO at the Opportunity Alliance, and I chair this committee and I'm a member of the council.
My name is Grayson. I'm with the Attorney General's office, and I will pass it to Elizabeth.
I am Elizabeth Porter, and I am the new coordinator for the Recovery Council.
Chastity.
Everyone, Chastity Toole, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm representing the harm reduction community.
Todd.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Todd Brackett. I'm the sheriff in Lincoln County.
Excellent. Melissa.
Hi, everyone. Melissa Hackett. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the coordinator for the Maine Child Welfare Action Network.
Great. And Maggie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Maggie McLaughlin. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services for the City of Portland. I am on the council, but not on this committee, but I join in when I can. Thanks.
That's great. So I had to leave the meeting early last week, so let me give a sense of what I think our agenda is today, and Grayson, help me out if I miss anything. So, per my email, an email from Mary, I think the group wanted to look at the ED job description. From there, I think Elizabeth, you're new, and Grayson, if there's anything around contracts and grants that people want to, if there's updates or any conversation we want to have about that. And then Mary mentioned, and this is long been on our agenda, if we also want to spend a little bit of time talking about future funding. And I kind of try to look through some old materials to kind of help percolate a conversation. And I think that is it. Did I miss anything, Grayson, in the agenda? I don't have it in front of me either.
Nope, I don't think so. And I can promote you so that if you need to screen share for some reason when we talk about the job description, you can.
Would it be helpful to put the job description up? Did everyone get it? I'm sorry, I just got it because Mary sent it to me this morning. Okay. Grayson, can you actually do that? Or I really
Yeah, yeah, of
don't
course.
think I know how to do that very well. So it
No
might be just
problem.
easier to go through it and then
Yeah,
by
absolutely.
section.
Just getting pulled up. All right. Can you guys see that all right?
Perfect. Okay, just before we dive into it, any overall thoughts or questions about the job description and any conversation that happened last week that I may have missed from the meeting? Okay, any comments or question in the first section, program management and leadership? Okay, moving along to the next section, process development and coordination. Maggie,
Hi, Joe, and tell me if I should not be providing input as
no, we would love your input.
okay. I feel like this should be really overhauled to really emphasize a leadership role in the grant making process. And so I think if we could articulate out from proposal, process identification, delivery, then grant management and oversight during the actual grant implementation, and then close out with monitoring, running, and the implementation and closeout, I think that would be really helpful in emphasizing the role and the knowledge and experience that we need an executive director to really have.
Great. So can you scroll back up? You're talking the first section, just overhaul and starting expanding a little bit on the first or a lot on the first one, program management or
I think on the, no, I'm distinguishing program management from grant management. I think on the like management and leadership level, they need to manage us and provide strategic vision for the council to give feedback on how the process will go. And then on the process development and coordination, that needs to be much more in the weeds on identification and liaising with stakeholders to create actual pathways by which grants can be, grant processes and application processes can move, and all of the things involved in that. And somewhere, and I don't think it necessarily lives in program management, but in people management, and needs to have some people management of the actual team that they need to oversee. And I think we could articulate out a vision of what that team might need to look like. And it's a bit tough because some of those questions are still up in the air, but at least one or two more people, one at least dedicated to monitoring and evaluation, and another to coordination. I think we could have, two or three on like the admin side. And so I don't know if that helps to clarify. It kind of fits, it needs, all the sections need to be adjusted. But I see that top section as really around strategy and maybe even reducing strategy to like 30% and then scaling up process and development by at least 50% with really in the weeds knowledge of how these things can move. Or not necessarily how they can move, but proof that this individual can identify and work with stakeholders to make a pathway for grants oversight.
and are you suggesting that process development coordination would become sort of the grant management section?
Yes, so the overseeing grants, overseeing the team that oversees them, et cetera, that all lives there. The vision lives at the top. And I think the vision can be scaled down and the oversight can be scaled up.
Great. Any other suggestions in that spirit? I like those suggestions, Maggie. I think that's really helpful. And what about finance management and compliance? Any suggestions there? Why don't we keep scrolling, Grayson, and we'll go down to the next. I think it gets into education experience. Any comments on the education experience section? Maggie?
Sorry, I have a lot of thoughts on this.
No, perfect. I'm loving it. This is great because I missed the end of the meeting. So
I think we should kick it off with like the top most important thing is experience leading revolving grant funds. And then secondary would be experience working with governments and various community-based organizations. So you're somebody who's good with stakeholders, somebody who knows how to run a revolving grant fund. And I think we need to be clear that they need to have led the revolving grant fund, not just been a part of it. Because a lot of the labor here is around creating the system. And so if they were just implementing a system that already existed, they may be able to, but we're in a place where we need somebody who's proven that they can.
I agree with that. And the 10 years of experience, was that a discussion at the meeting or was that just Mary signaling that for us?
I think that was just Mary signaling it. There was somebody did
It
mention
was a
that
suggestion
yeah.
from Maggie. That's where that came from.
That seems high to me. I'm curious what other folks feel about that, the number of years of experience and Joe, just for your reference, I also wasn't able to be at the meeting. I was at the State House, so I missed the discussion that the council had about this. If anybody else can share, if folks shared that they felt it was not enough years or too many years or just a point of consideration for us. And Maggie, I really appreciate what you've offered already. I think those are really helpful thoughts and would support the suggestions that you've already made.
Yeah,
Maggie, do you want to talk about the 10 years of experience and your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I was just thinking this is just such complex work, particularly the integration with the AG's office, the range of partners and grants that we have, and the lack of systems that we have to support it. Because we're essentially, if we remain and this is under the assumption that we remain the grant making organization. So we're not outsourcing grant making to other organizations. But if we remain that, the amount of work that needs to go into streamlining this so it can be smooth sailing, Mary's done such an amazing job getting us where we are, but there's still so much to be done to allow us to be able to effectively distribute this money and be accountable for what we do distribute. That I felt that we're really looking at someone who's almost, working at an executive director or higher level, in their ability to engage at both strategy and operations level in a really complex circumstance. This is harder than coming into an existing grant making organization. You have to build so much. And so that's where I was really thinking 10 years would be targeting that kind of level of leadership that we may need to get us to a place where we're able to quickly distribute the funds. But if that's not our primary goal, then certainly I think we could get by with lower levels of experience. But just I was thinking of how complex this was when I put that suggestion out there.
I always struggle. I totally agree with you. I struggle even in that TOA and asking, does the compensation line up with 10 years of experience? And Maggie, do you have any thoughts being a big
Absolutely not. I think we would massively have to overhaul the compensation, but
Yeah.
I think that would be a small price to pay if it meant that we could then distribute everything else and be more accountable for everything else in the future.
Yeah, that's where I'd land too.
That was where I was kind of going to with, sorry, Liz, I didn't mean to jump ahead of you. With the pay, I was trying to go back and remember how much we were thinking for this position and then commensurate with the experience. So it might be helpful if we all could do some thinking about if the 10 years of experience is going to stay as a recommendation, what would we also recommend that council consider for a pay that would meet that threshold?
Liz.
Yeah, and I guess I'm agreeing with everybody. And I guess I would say that it's 10 years of experience in those things. And it doesn't necessarily have to be delivering human services, education, or public services. It could be public health. It could be, I think, as you were saying, Maggie, it could be administering um, what's the word you used? It's not grant writing, it's being a grant administrator. And so putting that 10 years experience, like putting all those things under the 10 years of experience bucket. But I think adding in public health, like we need a systems person. We don't necessarily need a person who's done direct service work. We need a person who understands how to operate, how to be and function as an operational systems person. I mean, of course, having some of that experience in direct service is great if that's what they have, but I don't know that that's the necessary part. It's the part in operating systems and understanding this work and grant management and evaluation and like overseeing that kind of work.
Mhm. I agree too with that. And I think that often comes with the price tag. Like that's a really unique skill set. And if you're really good at it, you're really good at it. And we definitely need that. Let's just keep going, Grayson, with the other skills and characteristics, and then we can see how we're. Any thoughts about this section? And again, I missed this conversation, but did we get a job description? Did Mary borrow from a foundation or anywhere that, Liz, to your point, that does this? Do you know? Anyone know? Because there are groups that do this. We'll put it on our homework list. Any other thoughts about the JD?
Um, I'm curious about the other skills and characteristics. I wonder if there needs to be anything here related to contracting, or if folks feel like that's like less important now that we're looking to sort of sub that out. I don't know if that's a long-term plan or a short-term plan, but it feels a little missing from what I'm seeing Mary spent a lot of her time doing.
Yes, I think that needs to be added in, regardless of the where we're going.
Yeah. To some degree or another, I think the ED is going to end up being involved in that work. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, are we ready to move this on? Obviously, we won't be voting today. We'll need to work on this, and I can get my thoughts back to the thoughts from the group back to Mary, um, to work on. But I think we'll need to continue to fine tune it somewhat. And I think if we could look at another organization's JD, I think that might help inform us as well.
Joe, it's Gordon. Can you hear me?
Yep. Hi, Gordon.
Sorry to be late. You should be able to see me. I can't see myself.
We can see you.
Okay. Yeah, sorry to be late. Do I need to introduce myself for the external audience?
Sure. And then I'm going to just scroll through. So go ahead, Gordon, and then I'll ask Liz as well.
Okay. I'm Gordon Smith, the State's Director of Opioid Response. I'm a member of the council and a member of the Grants and Programs Committee.
And Liz.
Hi there, I'm Liz Blackwell-Moore, Director of Public Health for Cumberland County.
And Katrina. Oh,
Hi, I'm
maybe.
Katrina Bonish. I'm with the Attorney General's office.
Thank you, Katrina. Gordon, did you have any comments on the job description?
No, I did not do.
Okay, great. So why don't we take this down? And I'm glad that Liz, you've joined and that I think we have people who kind of have a better memory on it, but I'd like to kind of lead us through a conversation about categories of kind of possible grant funds. And I know, and please say if this is not the right place to discuss this, but we've talked about who we are to schools. So Liz or Gordon or Todd, do you know sort of the intersection of that better than I do? Like what schools are doing and who are we to the work of schools as it relates to this funding? I know we haven't talked much about it in our 2.5 years together.
And Joe, can I ask a clarifying question? Are you asking about the school like MOU component?
Kind of that, and like just what is I know at the last meeting or a couple meetings we talked about schools, and I think their hope that they would get more funding from us, and I could be off on that, but I'm trying to think categorically of possible areas and schools. I would just love to sort of have the council have some clarity around who we are to each other and the funds that they got. And then I'd love to talk about youth, what's going on with youth. Todd, I'm going to put words in your mouth, but a couple years ago, you used to talk about like, I'm going to call it mini grants, but kind of smaller amounts of money that could go to communities. So I kind of just looked through our history to see, but schools was kind of the most unknown to me. And it's okay if Pat's not here and she often talks about schools.
Well, I'd be happy to share a little bit about my understanding of the MOU that's specific to schools that I think we, so far have not funded directly to, I don't think we funded anything that's directly to schools, but the MOU I think is pretty easy to read, and I actually encourage everybody to read it. It's only 3 pages long, 2 pages, yeah, 3 pages long. It's pretty short. But my read of it is that it says 3% of Maine's litigating school administrate units. There's like specific school, and we should ask Brendan about this because there's specific litigating school units, administrative units. So my understanding is it's not all the schools, and that it's 3% of Maine's recovery fund should be earmarked for Maine school administrative units for special education purposes.
Hmm.
That's like the overarching
Hmm.
topic. And so I think the idea is that children have been impacted by this epidemic in a different way, and that they may require more support within schools with special education. So if you read this, it's it's pretty well defined
Hmm.
what it is, and that we should have an RFP process that goes out to school administrative units for specifically funding um, projects that are special education projects that are above and beyond what they already have for
Hmm.
that are funded special education. So it has to be above and beyond. And then there's like specific things. So it's really just like another RFP process that we should actually be doing, is how I understood it. And it's really specific. Like it's not loosey-goosey, like what do schools want? It's really specific.
That's very helpful.
Liz, let me ask you a question. Don't I recall maybe in that MOU or somewhere that there was either an opportunity, but maybe an obligation on the council to obtain a consultant expert in special education to help us with that process. Is that not in there?
You're right. I didn't like read this like right before I got in here. I didn't read the whole thing, but I think you're right that we should. It does, I think it encourages, but let me just see really quickly. Um, well, you have to give me a second here while I read it. Oh, here it is. Prior to deciding on grant applications, the Recovery Council will consult with an expert in special education matters selected by the Maine litigating school administrative units. So there's a couple
But,
steps here. So there's a couple steps. There's one, who are the Maine litigating school administrative units? Two, having them choose an expert in special education. Three, coming up with an RFP process that ensures that they're supplementing, not supplanting,
Hmm.
and it's extending and expanding existing services. And then figure out where to send the money. Like, there's some pretty specific things in here.
well, I think, Joe, that we should probably put it on the agenda for a council meeting. Have Brendan. Brendan has the list of litigating school districts,
Yeah.
and he's got the names of their attorneys. And it seems like it's almost time that we could reach out to them to give us their list of potential consultants, because that doesn't say that we're encouraged to obtain a consultant. It says we will obtain a consultant to help us with that. And it seems wise to involve that consultant early in the process and not do, we're not expert. I mean, maybe there's somebody in the 15 of us that's an expert in special education, but I'm sure not. We can also draw in, from the Department of Education. I'm sure they have such specialists, and I can talk to the commissioner about that. But yeah, I think it's probably time that we started thinking about this. So thanks for bringing it up, Joe.
Yeah, I know Pat's been talking about it, and I think, do we, and unfortunately Pat nor Mary are here, so I think Gordon bringing it back to the full council, and I can bring that back to Mary and Pat, is worth sort of a beginning process because it is a heavy lift, it sounds like. And we have a lot going on, but I think it's really important. I mean, this group could be suffering more than we know. So I think the resources that we could get to them would be wonderful. So I will take that as my to-do list or on my to-do list and take it back. And then this group can kind of keep chewing away on it. And to your question, Gordon, if someone does know an expert, we can, because Pat will be in, usually she's here. I think she's on vacation. So, but I think it's been a couple years, so it's probably time to add this to our list.
And
So what,
honestly, it's 3 pages, so it's easy enough to read.
yeah,
It's just that we haven't, like, we've been spending a lot of time on other stuff. So I think if everybody reads it before the next meeting, that would be great.
yeah, great point. So if we go back a couple of years or a year and a half, like what are some other areas that we've talked about that are potential funding opportunity that we could potentially fund? So if we go, I would kind of look through Dr. Johnson, Kim's list, but do people have sort of just to capture them so we can start thinking about? And I just throw out youth because they seem to be a group that's, and I just broadly use that term, but do people have ideas around areas of that or populations that we should be focusing on? Todd, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
I know
perfect.
sometimes my microphone acts up, so I'm not sure this is the right place for it, Joe, but one of the things that stuck out for me at our first public hearing, at UMA, was the researcher from the university system that was looking for a piece of equipment, specific piece of equipment. I'm going from memory now, right? Around research for the next Sublocade or the next naloxone or specific to substance use disorder. It was a very finite number at the time. My recollection is it was around $70,000 or $75,000. That was a year or so ago, 2 years ago. I lose track of time, but anyway, I just it was unique. It stood out to me. It kind of stood out to me as low hanging fruit, but that was just me at the time. And I just don't know how we get to items like that to make sure that they don't get lost. Clearly, it's not wasn't a program. Clearly, I don't think we received any grant applications that fit into our pillars necessarily right now. I think it probably falls in the prevention pillar, and I'm not sure the way the prevention pillar is designed right now that it would fit even. But I just throw that out there.
Excellent. That's great. I'm glad you raised that. Melissa.
I'm gonna probably play the I'm new here card for like year one. So just I'll lead off with that. I will say, just lifting up what I've heard others say in council meetings, especially as we talk about the grant proposals that are out there. I've heard a few folks say, what about innovations? And maybe what Todd lifted up is an example of that. I've wondered where that fits in with what's in the MOU around evidence-based interventions and efforts, but I'm just wanting to reflect that up that I've heard council members saying, what about innovations? Where do those fit in the pillars, or are they outside of them in a separate opportunity for folks to come forward with funding? So we'll just lift that up for folks to think about too.
Liz.
Another one I think also that has come up that came up in the prevention work group that we actually brought forward as not a prevention actual effort, but a like cross pillar effort was really more coordination within public health districts or areas in the state, more funding positions that help do coordination between prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery. In New Hampshire, they have in each of their public health districts, they have like a very specific person who is funded to really bridge and coordinate between efforts. And so they really understand the whole of what's happening. Because on the prevention side, there are folks that may not know what's happening in the treatment recovery. And certainly often treatment and recovery is not like, doesn't know really what's going on in prevention. It's kind of out of their purview, right? It's not the work they're funded and paid to do. So That's something that was brought forth, and I thought there was seemed to be interest actually amongst council members on something like that as well. We
That's
can
great.
bring that forth and share what the actual thing was and some of the resources for that, that, to put in people's hoppers to read for future reference.
That's great. And oh, go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, and I'll mention again, you kind of touched on it, Joe. It would be it would be nice if we had an ability to do smaller when we have a smaller request. I'm thinking of a local recovery center, relatively new one in Newcastle, who I'm just using this as an example. This hasn't come up, but who may be looking for some transportation funds to get folks over to the methadone clinic who don't in Rockland who don't otherwise have transportation, but they're only talking about, you know, less than $5,000 or something. You know what I mean? Whatever the dollar amount might be, I would just hate for those to get lost in the shuffle.
I agree. And let's pin that. I do want to come back. I think we need to talk more about this, Todd, because we did talk. So Chastity and Liz.
So I went back to the post-it exercise we did with Kim forever ago now, and mostly to be able to settle the debate between Gordon and Liz from the end of our meeting the other day. But with that, I think one thing that we should look at is doing some set aside flex funds that isn't just the family side and it is more targeted to other things. So it can cover transportation and be a lot more accessible. Some of the other things that we haven't talked about but should be looking at is looking into the tribes more.
Mhm.
We still haven't done a ton with that. I mean, Wabanaki, we're giving them money, but outside of that, like we haven't done anything with the tribes.
Mhm.
Other things from the post-its, doing some smaller funds like Todd's talking about for people with lived experience, their projects. Like I think of, Recover Together. That's a small, well, it's larger now, but it's a group of people with lived experience who do tons of things across the state, and it's all out of everyone's own pocket. Being able to fund some of that stuff, but not as high barrier as the way that we just did the application process.
Mhm.
Um, there were more, and I lost it, but overdose prevention centers, when and if that ever comes through, that would be like innovation that we could look at setting money aside for, like Rhode Island did. And I would personally love to set money aside in Maine to a safe supply pilot, but I don't know if there'd be as much buy-in there and
Mhm.
research.
Mhm. Thanks. Good job, Chastity, researcher. Liz.
One thought I have, and I think I'm down for small grants, but they're really difficult to do. Only because of the way our structure currently is. And so if we change our structure and we make it a little more streamlined for small grants to be more easily happen, great. In the meantime, while we're kind of doing that to make things easier to do those kind of smaller grants and not have them all have contracts that the AG's office has to approve and sign that have all these things in them.
Mhm.
I do think there are some other ways. One, we could be encouraging or having a conversation with the subdivisions. The subdivisions can give out funds much, much easier, right? I'm a subdivision that has funds that we gave out and there are ways in which we could encourage them, like that this is still a need that we see existing. Is there a possibility for county subdivisions or other subdivisions that have larger amounts of money to set aside small amounts for small grants? There's also talking to some organizations like, Maine Community Foundation. I'm not sure they want to do this, but they do this kind of thing where it's small amounts of grants or funneling funds, kind of like we're trying to do for the flex funds that Chastity is going to tell us about how it started, but doing that with organizations who are connected to, like, who maybe are recovery centers that have, or treatment centers or crisis centers that have the ability to do flex funds or have an experience in doing that. so that it doesn't have to be that we give individual contracts, but we have somebody who's given money to provide the kind of things you're talking about, Todd. I'm just worried don't have the functionality right now to do small grants.
I didn't actually settle your debate. Sorry, I'm going to come back in and tell you. It was in Liz's handwriting on the prevention pillar, direct flexible funding for families and young people most impacted who are receiving support services. So that's where it started. And I connected it to like what the CCC does down here with the Hope Fund. And I think from that, that's how like we all led into like people in recovery, but it didn't start that way. So sorry to burst that bubble, but
No, that's okay, because I'm
everyone
gonna
was right
find
in different ways.
I've been actually looking for the actual vote because I know what the vote says. And so, but I think I appreciate you saying where it stemmed from too. And I think again, like I go back to the same place, which is it's all necessary, but that's just not what we voted on. So we voted on it as a prevention mechanism for prevention dollars that it's accounted for as a prevention dollar amount because we had right? We were doing the pillars for that first year and it counted in the prevention dollar amount. I agree with you, Chastity, that figuring out ways to provide those kind of flexible funds for others who are receiving support services and are having crisis and this can tip them over the scales into, ensuring they are able to stay in recovery or, get the treatment they need or whatever. I'm all for it.
Me too, agreed. Uh, Back to you, Todd.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Liz. I think that it would be good to try to encourage our the local participating local I'm not getting the right term right but I also know that can sometimes be like herding cats. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just they're independent government entities and with ideas of their own and someone with processes of their own. But I don't mean that we shouldn't go there. But do we have to? My question is this, really, I think, do we have to? Is it possible? And I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this question. Is it possible to not look at these smaller? Would it be possible to set aside like $50,000 or whatever number is for the council and call them, in my words, discretionary funds that, some letter of justification that's voted on by the council. In other words, let's not look at these money as grants needing contracts. Not nothing beyond 1 year. You know what I mean? It would be issued the checks one, you know what I mean? Maybe with some policy around no duplication. You know what I mean? It's something you can't come back to necessarily every year. I don't know. I realize that, we're government, whether we want to admit it or not. I don't particularly like it, but it's the process. I understand it. It's important. Um, I just didn't know if there was a way to leverage again small amounts as a council in a little bit quicker fashion.
Let's hold that. I want to keep coming back to what you're saying, Todd. Melissa.
Yeah, I just appreciate this thinking about how do we get smaller amounts of money out the door. So would welcome that as maybe we need to bring in Brendan or others to think about how we might do that in a more nimble way than we are able to through a contracting process, which I do think would be cumbersome for a $5,000 amount of money. Oh, there's Brendan. It's like I materialized him. And then the other thing I was just going to mention on the conversation about reaching out to the other subdivisions, we had this conversation about the prevention work group recommendations and whether we could just share those things as a point of information to the counties and the other folks that have resources as well. And we might think about doing something that more broadly as a council, like this is what we've focused our efforts on funding, might consider same. I mean, we can't compel anyone to do anything, but we might be able to share information as food for thought for folks that might be interested in taking that up as they consider making their own allocations.
That's great, definitely. Brenda, did you want to weigh in on this exciting conversation?
It's so exciting. Uh, um, it's a good conversation. And I appreciate it. The I think the limited input I have at this time is there is a model for a small dollar contract that I've had on my list for a little while to turn into a template for the council. Um, I don't have the details in front of me about like, what the threshold is for it, but my recollection is it's meant to be a much simpler, shorter contract.
Mhm.
Um, although, you know, anyway, it's a simpler contract, shorter contract, but it does like the size of the contract or the size of the document does not affect, how long it takes to go through my office or once it leaves my office through other offices here in the state. So I don't have a solution, but I have heard about the issue of timing and the amount of time it takes to go through the state systems.
Todd.
My mind's just spinning here.
No,
So
I love it.
would it be possible, maybe the opposite to Liz's idea? Would it be possible to work with the local subdivisions, or an independent entity to handle that we could give X amount of money a year to handle these small requests for us? So it gets bogged down that one time going through the state process, the contract process that Brendan talks about, that's important, and then goes out. I'm just thinking outside of the box. Maybe that's not possible. Maybe that'll cost us more money to get somebody to manage that for us. Maybe that's a bad idea.
No, I really like that idea. And I think Liz mentioned Maine Community Foundation, and I think they're expanding or growing that arm, and they're super credible and really great. So I
And Joe,
think,
I think Ben has talked to them much earlier on in the iteration of the Recovery Council about doing just that. So you might want to,
right.
include him in the conversation.
Well, I will prepare something for when we update the council, and we'll get out this conversation to folks in a more user-friendly, in a simple way for the council members to absorb it. But I do think that, oh, go ahead, Gordon.
Well, the sheriff Brackett made one comment that I'd like to make sure it gets in your notes, Joe, that because it's quite intriguing. It might not go anywhere, but he mentioned, would it be possible that these wouldn't be considered contracts, but would be more grants? I've seen we have one program at the CDC, by the way, that for 4,000, there are a series of mini grants, $4,999. So there must be something at the $5,000 threshold that kicks in at the state level. But I love the idea that there wouldn't even be contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it might not be possible to do it that way, but because the council has great jurisdiction, great discretion over our funds, if we wanted to say, well, this $100,000, we're not even going to consider to be contracts. This is how we're going to deal with these funds. I also think that absolutely probably the easiest way to do it would be to have one contract with it could be, any philanthropic organization that would do this for us. Now, yes, the one thing you lose, let's say we put $100,000 into it, you're going to lose, $20,000 probably off the top for them to do it. But they would have the ability then, maybe within a 30-day period, to get the money out the door. It's no different than what we intended to do, of course, with the Alphon Foundation. We basically said, look, we're going to give you $1.x million for you to support these 28 youth development organizations, and that's going to be happening. So I think with the money that we have, it shouldn't be that difficult to have a mini grant process. I think Mary could learn more about it. And some of the other states have done this, but I like the idea. It's very innovative and creative that these wouldn't be contracts at all.
No, I heard Todd's point loud and clear. They would be grants, and I think if we can get around all the other stuff, it would be very effective and much needed. So I can bring this back to Pat and Mary, this particular, I think, and get Ben in the huddle and Brendan, you to sound, and just sort of get this moving. I think it is. I think the grants that we did in the fall, like they were big numbers. I think in some of the little folks would say, you're out of my league. I think when they look at what we awarded. So I think anything we can do to make those dollars or get those out to people who really need them would be really great. So I know it's more work, but I think it's really, Todd, you've been saying almost since day one, how important it is, and I think it is really important too. Do we want to say anything more about innovation? Again, retrieving from our memory back a couple years ago. Let's erase that and where that lands in our thinking, because I'm having a hard time to retrieve it. Liz, Gordon, Brendan, Chastity, the folks that were here for that conversation. It wasn't carved out, right? It's sort of in the pillars, but
Yeah, it wasn't back to the post-it thing. It was just thrown under like other, and that's where we put a few different things in there. Do you want to hear the few post-its?
sure.
Uh, SUD workforce development, which we have not talked about that. Student loan forgiveness for workforce, being rural focused, phones and phone cards, transportation assistance. I don't know what this one said. Funding infrastructure for small programs
Mhm.
and research.
Yeah, workforce was on my mind too. It was on my list as I was writing it before this meeting.
Yeah.
What about peer recovery coaches? Gordon, how's that? What's the need there for more peer recovery coaches?
Well, the courses continue to be quite popular. We keep training, recovery coaches. We had a cohort of youth recovery coaches that are like 18 to 25, and it's a special curriculum that they can recovery coach people from like 12 to 20. So I would, if you asked me to list, 15 of the most acute needs, that would not be one of them because it's not real expensive. We're deploying them in every place from emergency departments to recovery centers. So I think it's been a success, Joe. And so I'm not saying that there couldn't be something more there, but I think we have more acute needs, to tell the truth.
Well, I think that's good. That's really good to hear. What I was thinking about is that like there are Medicaid funded programs or models where it's built in. But if there
Mhm.
are an organization that can't afford, I was thinking more on that end that would love to have a peer recovery coach, but it's not in their financial model. Again, it's not, to use your word, probably the most acute need. But as we, as that movement continues, which is amazing, and we have peer recovery coaches at TOA, just I was thinking about sort of smaller programs that don't have that type of funding. What's their ability to hire folks like with that background?
Yeah, I almost think that we saw some applications for that in November,
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
and we may even
Yes.
have we may even have supported
Yes.
one. So yeah, I mean, there's always um, opportunities like that. Yeah.
Great. My memory, I'm digging deep into my memory. Okay, Liz, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, Joe, like in terms of this conversation, like I didn't know we were going to have this conversation. Maybe it was in the agenda. I guess I'm curious, like, do we know what kind of money we're like, has finance committee come out with like what's the dollar amount that we have to spend this year? Like, do we have a sense of what we're, I mean, I know we've been spending most of our time really trying to figure out how to complete the things we've already said we're going to do. And I guess if we're kind of, if that's just going and we're moving on, great. I guess I would love to know what we're dealing with. We haven't really decided, like, are we doing it by priority of things that are happening? Are we doing it by pillar? I feel like there's like just some things to work out in terms of, I know how sometimes this group can become like, we can all become like a runaway train on one thing. And it would be just good to know what the parameters we're working with are, to have this conversation in a way that moves us forward.
No, I'm really glad that you raised that, Liz, because I'm kind of encouraging a little bit of a runaway train right now because we've been trying for like 18 months to have this conversation and things get in the way. So what I really want to do is sort of like take today's and like look at it. We can prioritize. But yes, I think Brendan, I do, or Gordon, you're on the finance committee. I don't think we do know the budget. But this work, I don't think we have to be in immediate action, but I'm just trying to like sort of elicit like what's on our mind as the committee, and I'll get it out to y'all and we can look at it and we can start teeing it up with the full council. But I think it's not going to happen by March or in May. So I think it wasn't really on the agenda. And Mary mentioned it to me, so I'm like, great. If we have time, I'm gonna raise it up because I think there are needs that we've talked about, and that was really my goal today. But we don't know the money, your money, the budget question.
I think Mary mentioned the other day that um it was around 7 million that Ben told her that we had for this year. I don't know if that's like official or takes into account the 4 million for prevention or not. I mean, I don't think it should, but that's the number that was mentioned just a few days ago.
Great. Thank you, Chastity. Let's go with that. And plus, plus, plus. Gordon, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we could move it along, Joe, by honestly saying from the grants committee, asking the council to require that the finance committee provide to the council. Could be every meeting, that'd be my preference, but we could get pushed back maybe every 3 meetings. But we've almost, I hate to say this, and again, as I said on some other Zooms today, these problems are never the fault of one person. It's the damn system. The fact that we have to give a 2-week notice before the finance committee can meet. I'm not on the finance committee, by the way. It's the only damn committee I'm not on. And I don't want to be on the finance committee, but we operate blindly. I think Liz and I would strongly agree with it, that we need to know each meeting how much money has come in from these settlements. And I'm almost thinking that, okay, the people that would be required to work a lot on that, including, certainly Ben as the treasurer and Brendan, they're really busy. So maybe we could say every quarter, because money is coming in and going out and we don't have the balance. And we owe it to those organizations too, who we said, well, as money comes in, we'll continue to look at applications that had a favorable score. And we just do not know. And it isn't because they don't want us to know, it's that they're really busy. But this is a pretty essential function. So maybe it would go better if the grants committee, I think it seems appropriate to me for the grants committee to ask the council if we couldn't require a report at whatever period the council thinks is reasonable.
Perfect, and that will be done. I will send that request, and I think that's a great idea. It's a process of reconciliation. We just always sort of need to know where we're at financially. And I know it's painful, but it's really important, Gordon, to your point. Brendan.
Just to just briefly, you all already have access to how much has come in to the recovery fund because it's on our website. That's a different number than Ben's budget or the treasurer's budget. That will have what's available for the council to spend. Not to be pedantic. Sorry, Gordon.
No, it's a very appropriate comment, Brendan. And I would simply respond by saying, these 15 people, for the most part, are volunteers. And we shouldn't have to go to the website to know what we have to work with each meeting. That there should be, like any other nonprofit organization, there ought to be a treasury report that comes in on some regular basis.
Yeah, and to respond to that a little further, my understanding is that, between the demands that have been on the treasurer and his other job since the beginning of the year, and I do know that there's been outreach to my office asking for that sort of account level information, and both parties, I think are working together in good faith to try to make sure that information is available to each other as currently as possible. But I'm not disputing your point, Gordon. I'm just adding a little additional color.
Got it.
And I would just add, speaking as a true program person, we should always be teeing up program ideas to put forth. Like finance can't sort of it does sort of guide us a lot, but I think we should be teeing up program ideas and opportunities. Liz and then Todd.
One thing I do think would be helpful if like finance committee report or something gets included on the website. So like I went to go find the original budget that we all approved and I can't find it like anywhere on the website. So I just think, I don't know, this is just a side note, but it would be nice if the finance reports that you request, Joe, also come with something written.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, like programming should also be happening. I was just trying to figure out what the parameters of this current conversation are based on, because I have like lots of ideas. And is that what we're doing here? Are we doing lots of ideas? Are we going back to the ones that were prioritized? Or like, I think part of the conversation we had about having a consultant for Mary was talking about how do we get to the next round of prioritization and strategic planning? How do we get there? Because it's felt like our strategic planning and sort of like there's a little bit of it that's like a little haphazard, and also which is sometimes can be fine, but also sometimes like if we had like a guided process by which we're deciding. I think our last guiding document that Chastity's reading some of those things from, the guidance was how do we get to reducing overdose deaths, which is different from what our charge is as a council to address abatement issues with opioids, which is larger than just that. So I think how we come to this conversation, it kind of matters about what then gets thrown forward as ideas or where we need to go next. And I think there's a lot of new people on the council that might really want to have their input into a strategic planning. Like, I don't want to speak for you all, but they join the council with their own ideas that I think are worth having their a chance to have those voiced in like a good process.
Excellent point. And I think, the prevention committee is a really good role model and example of work. And I think we've been so tasked with contracts and grant management that we need to be working in this meeting and outside this meeting to move this work. So like today is a little bit all over the place, but my thought wasn't about, I did go back and look at the old information, but I think it's also real-time information that we're seeing in our communities, what's happening. So I think, and then we need to be working it in and out of this meeting so that we can continue to move it forward. So I will reach out to Ben around the finance side and request that. Todd, did you put your hand down or did you
No,
just give?
I was just going to say I'm on the finance committee. I'll be at the meeting on Friday. So if the topic comes up, I think I can share what you're looking for. And I can think of a number of models where it might be not too much work on Ben, to just get a monthly report or whatever it is for the council. So we'll talk about that on Friday.
That's great. Anything else in this lane? So Melissa, I'm not, oh, go ahead. I think that's someone from, I don't know. Grayson is great. Someone, it looks like someone has a question that's not in our group. So I don't know what to do with that because I don't know how to do
That's
anything.
Sarah.
Yeah.
That's the consultant we hired, and
Okay.
Mary just asked me if she's participated at all. So I
Here, I can promote her really
think we
quick.
should
Sorry,
welcome that.
yeah, I
Okay.
can.
Thank you guys. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know that we were including her in the meeting. Apologies. There we go.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Hi,
Can you hear
Sarah.
me? Hi.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I had just wanted to bring up a couple of things, and Mary had mentioned that somebody could probably promote me once if that came up. So, a couple of things I just wanted to clarify. Since the fact that Mary is resigning and there'll be a new executive director, and there's also a conversation about, how is it going to look? Not just the details that you guys are describing as funding, details, what you want to fund, but also how, right? Whether or not you might partner with another funder to do the work that they do, but then maybe also do some yourself. All of these strategic questions that you brought up, Liz, and that was a part of my at least initial work coming up, which would be finding out about how it's gone, what people are thinking forward. The complication of a new executive director coming on, I just want to sort of like just take a deep breath and also like clarify all of those things matter, because the strategic planning work, if there was time to do it all before the executive director, and you had staffing support to do that, it would be, even if I led you through that, it's hard to do that without Mary. And I know Mary is really buried right now under contracts. And she wants to ensure there's a good transition. But I guess the comments I want to make, and also the question put to anyone who has thoughts about it as far as how I can be best engaged over the next few months with my contract with the change of Mary leaving, is it possible to wait until the new executive director comes on to then have more of these strategic questions and be able to jump off, maybe into the fall with where you're going next? Is that something you're considering? Have you had those conversations yet? I know not everybody knew Mary was leaving until last week. So those are all the questions. And, I'm on board for a certain number of hours every month until the end of June, and there is a plan, but things can be shifted depending on if some ideas come forward that would help move some things forward without jumping the gun without the new ED.
Yeah, I kind of, as the chair of this committee, I kind of think for me it's fact finding a little bit. I think it's sort of pulling together information. I would be reluctant to say we're gonna pause things. I think that's, we're charged with moving things forward. So Sarah, it might just happen but I think we need to sort of like compile, and I know Mary has done a lot of compiling of information and she's not here, but I think like who are we to each other? So the program committee really representing our side of the street, how it connects to finance. And I think it's today was sort of just, and I had talked to Mary about it, sort of just gathering information around people's thinking around program or community needs. So not really answering your question, but I don't think that I couldn't answer that definitively. But I open the floor to any of my colleagues around question. Okay. So why don't
I was
we
just curious if sorry, just last question.
go ahead,
So I'm
Sarah?
just so curious if the silence was because if my question wasn't clear, which it might not have been, if people don't have an opinion or they don't have enough information to sort of Like, I'm just curious where people are at. If it's like, well, we don't know because this idea of having a new executive director is so new that it's a brand new thing thrown in. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Has that thrown people for a loop?
Gordon.
Well, just so there's not silence, Sarah, in my case, I just want to think more about it. I've known about Mary's plans for a while, so I need to think about, what we can accomplish the next 6 months. One thing I feel strongly about is that anytime an organization like this, if we're going to do more strategic planning, we absolutely need to have the new executive director on board when we do that. That's not to say that we're gonna halt things. We've all, I think, agreed that the priority now is to get these contracts done and get that money flowing through the system. But this has been a great meeting because we haven't had a lot of opportunity in the press of other business to sit back and say, hey, whatever happened to that notion of innovation? So I've really appreciated this meeting, but that's why I was silent, Sarah. I want a little more time to think about all the pieces and how they might fit together.
Thank you. Very helpful, Gordon. Thank you.
Yeah, not just to say what he said, but I would share that I was feeling similar of like, I knew Mary was leaving, but I hadn't necessarily thought about how that adds a layer of complexity to strategic planning and decision making, and even just talking about what we will be able to do and when the timing of that makes sense, given that part of the conversation. So yeah, just also silence indicating needing more thought around the complexity of all of this. But appreciate you weighing in, Sarah, just like considerations for us to have as we're having these conversations and making sure that we're keeping in mind the ordering of things that's going to be most helpful.
Thank you, Melissa.
So Sarah, I don't know if you have intel. Why don't we jump into sort of just an update on contracts and grants? And I don't know, uh, Elizabeth, you're brand new, but Gordon, is there anything we need to talk about with regard to grants and contracts? And Grayson's here, Brendan, and if anyone has any updates, feel free to share.
I can share just what little I know. I participated on an important meeting with Brendan and Mary. I think Friday morning on Tessa's house, and I talked to actually the operator, Mr. McHugh, Attorney McHugh, today, and I think the contract for Tessa's house, as well as I know Alphon, because those people talked to me today, and the contracts for that Grayson really doing a tremendous amount of work on the two county projects, Franklin and Androscoggin. These are imminent. I have great confidence now that they'll be in this group A, if that's what we're calling it. So I feel that my obligation, before turning the work over to others, was to shepherd, particularly those three: Tessa's house, Androscoggin, Franklin. Brenda's done a tremendous amount of work going back and forth with the Alphon people, but I know they're quite happy now with the progress. So that's my report.
Thank you, Gordon. Okay.
I can jump in and give a small update on the ones that I've been working on. Most of the ones I have right now are kind of in a review process. I finished up a first draft of the Healthy Androscoggin contract, which Gordon mentioned, which is a needs and planning assessment, as well as a draft of one of the recovery center contracts, which we're hoping can then be a template for all the other recovery centers. So once those are out, once those have been reviewed, those should be able to move forward pretty quickly. And like Gordon said, be part of that like group A. Those are just the first group of contracts that we're getting out. We're hoping to get those executed. I think around May 1st. Don't quote me on that though. And then for the Franklin County contract, that one's two-sided. It's the needs and planning assessment as well as the recovery center. And that one I'm just about finished drafting. I'll probably have that one sent over for review tomorrow.
That's great. Liz.
I'm wondering if we want to kind of like put a bow on this conversation about the flex funds because I know that contract is in process. And so I did look up the motion that was passed, and I actually was going to look at the video, but I didn't have time to look at the video, but I did look at the motion. And it's like a longer motion. Is this a good time to have this conversation?
Yes, Liz, would be great.
Okay. So the motion was to provide 1.5 million over 2 years to the Peter Alfond Foundation and Maine Youth Action Network to just directly support youth organization and their peer learning cohorts, and that the council provide 1.4 million over 2 years for direct flexible funding to organizations implementing home family service programs. Now it says home family service, but it's actually whole family service programs. There's no such thing as home family service programs. So it was written incorrectly. So we can go back and listen to the video, but I know the motion I gave. I know the motion that was given. It was whole family services. And so that was the initial motion. Now we came to the Program and Grants Committee and had Ian Yaffe come. Many of us were here. Ian came and so did Sue Powers. They were here and we talked about this. And somewhere in there, this idea that it should go to people who are in recovery kind of got hooked into this conversation. But that's not what the vote was. The vote was for prevention. And if we are looking at, just to go back to, okay, so regardless, if we go back to what is in the MOU that is approved uses, the way that flexible funding for prevention is an approved use by an evidence-based project is when it is delivered in the context of parent a parent coaching model, or a model in which people are engaged in this sort of in a service. There are models for providing like a guaranteed basic income or something like that also work. Those were great, but they aren't necessarily in this realm of prevention and being preventative. They work great for the individuals that are having them. I think in this case, I'm just saying this is how we got here. And I hope that this group will I really just hope we can go with how we got here and what we have been working on for now a year to get the flexible funding to CAP agencies. So we had thought about those getting to CAP agencies through OFI, which is why we had Ian Yaffe come in the first place, because OFI funds CAP agencies, and Sue Powers came because she's a part of MECAP that funds CAP agencies or supports the connection with CAP agencies. So that's sort of where we got to. So I would just love us to I hope we can agree. But I understand if there's disagreement, let's work through it so that we can get the contract rolling, because I think we'd love to see those flexible funds going out to families.
Thanks for raising that, Liz. Go ahead, Brendan, then Gordon.
Just to offer, in case it's supportive for Liz's work, if any, council member is interested, I'm sure we can identify, using what Liz was able to find about like the motion and the date and so forth. I'm sure we can identify like the video in which the discussion happened that led to the vote, because at the time my recollection is dim, but it's roughly that the council discussed this idea, and then the motion was very, very summary, as Liz just described it, or read it rather. So the conversation ahead of the motion would be a lot more illuminating than the motion itself. And if anybody needs or feels like they want to go back and review that, and maybe we do, just to include that, a reference to it in the contract, I'm sure we could track that down.
Thanks, Brendan. Gordon.
Yeah. Well, you don't need to do that on my behalf. I'm satisfied with what Liz has pulled out. I think one thing um, that I came to grips with was that I missed the meeting. I'm certain where Ian came. It might be the only meeting I've missed. I think I've missed two. But so when we made that pivot, it's very possible that I simply missed that meeting. I understand now with Liz's explanation that this is prevention, and it's not what I thought it was, but that's not anybody's fault but my own. And I don't want to confuse the things. I think it's fine what Liz and her group has planned here with supporting these families that are already enrolled in this program service. I will continue to think about, I'd love to, this really goes back to our mini grants, really, is that I'd still, and I'm channeling Courtney Gary Allen here, I'd still like to see eventually a program where maybe through the recovery centers, you can go in and get $300 to get your car repaired so you can get to the, I accept the fact that this is not that, and I'll continue to work, with Courtney and others to see what kind of program we could develop of mini grants, which would really come under the rubric of recovery support, people in recovery, and supporting them so that they have a better chance to stay in recovery. Amen.
Yes, yay. I'm all for that. Because like flex funds are awesome.
Yes.
Let's do it. I'm all in. I just didn't want this to get taken for something else. But I'm with you, Gordon. I'd be all in.
Yeah, and you just articulated exactly the way it went down. I was sitting next to you and Courtney because Courtney and I had to abstain because we voted on different things. So, and I know you championed this exactly the way you said it or related it. So I think we need to keep it that way. That's what receivers of the funds expect is going to happen. And flex funds are the bomb. They make a huge difference for families. And I was going to say during COVID, probably the Opportunity Alliance passed through $2 million as we had flex funds available, mostly to individuals and families, but they're key to the success of the families enrolled in whole families programs. So thank you for raising that, Liz, and I support you 100% what you just said. Brendan.
And yeah, it's, to emphasize something Liz said earlier, um, I just, strongly, suggest that I'm being inarticulate today. I'm sorry. Liz basically said it earlier that, the use of these funds does have to have that sort of clear link spelled out to the approved uses, about, there being a link to it being evidence-based or evidence-supported. And I'm confident that, Liz and Melissa and others can help us, spell that out appropriately so that the link is clear in the contract.
Perfect. Great. Okay. Anything else, Liz, in that lane? So let's just sort of like tidy up this conversation we just had about sort of future funding. So to sort of not tip over the cart, so to speak, I will take a stab at writing and probably Courtney, my colleague, Chastity, she is with us and she takes notes as well, and we'll like put together something. And I think we just need to think about it and we have time before the council meeting, but we'll get sort of this. I just wanted people to be thinking. That was my hope for today. And I get the timing and I get Mary's leaving. But I think this is what we're really assembled to do. I think it's grants, but we've spent more of our time on grants and contracts than this kind of generative work and this generative conversation about programming. Does that make sense to the group? Okay. Any other business to bring to the council today or to bring to the Todd? Oh, we can't. You're breaking up, Todd, I think, or I can't hear you.
How's that better?
Perfect.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give my disclaimer. I'm going to be away about 3 weeks next month, so I will do the best I can to join remotely um, from sunny South Carolina if I'm not on the golf course. Yeah, I just wanted to apologize ahead of time. I'll send out an email, and I appreciate the work. I like the direction we're going.
Yeah, and thank you, Todd. And I'll make sure you get all the information. And even if you can't join, we'll make sure you're in the huddle with this conversation and with the document. And I won't write prose. It'll be a brief, quick overview of this conversation and a request to Ben around the money. Any other business before we end? The next meeting is April the 1st at 2 or 3 p.m. Well, thank you, everyone. Good conversation. Thank you for indulging my all over the place conversation, and we'll see you next time we get together at the council meeting. Bye-bye.